Today we'll start parse trees. Okay. So we have already studied regular grammar, correct? So regular grammar is used to describe a set of strings. That's all, right? Some pattern. Then in this module we studied context-free grammar. In context-free grammar, we also assign meanings to those strings. Okay. So we care about how internal structure for that string is present. So basically, parse tree will capture this essential grammatic structure of the string. Okay. Remember, very important, it will capture grammar. I already told you while solving somebody's doubts, a program called as Yak, an utility, and it will create these trees using parser. Okay, using parser. So basically, in simple terms, if you have to explain, a parse tree, okay, parse tree, since it's a tree, it will represent syntactic structure of a string. Already yesterday, if then else example we saw, right? So a parse tree will represent that syntactic structure of the string based on some grammar that we have written. In that parse tree, every tree has internal nodes and leaf nodes. So in parse tree, internal nodes are labeled by non-terminals, capital letters, and leaf nodes are labeled by terminals and also sometimes an epsilon. Okay. So if I write a tree, then you can see that all these internal nodes will be capital letters and the small or leaf nodes will be your small letters or epsilon. Okay. So grammar. So we already know grammar has V, sigma, R and S. It's a rooted ordered tree. You can see leaf nodes are having these elements, that is sigma and epsilon. Sigma are non-terminals, correct? Sigma is terminals, that's what I said. And epsilon. The root is always labeled S or some letter which represents starting symbol. Okay, which represents starting symbol. So most of our examples had starting symbol as S itself. So root is always starting with the S. If in your grammar your starting symbol is something else like E, K, it will be that. Every other node, which means all interior node, will be B minus sigma. B has both terminals and non-terminals. So we have removed sigma, which means terminals are not there. So it will have only non-terminals. Okay. And let us say if M is non-leaf node labeled X, which means you have X somewhere and its children are X1, X2, etc. If I can expand this, the meaning of this is there will definitely be a rule like this. That means X derives X1, X2 up to Xn. Only if you have a root like this, I can expand a tree like this. All right. So next is derivation and rightmost derivation for some of the grammar symbols. So let us see for this. S derives AB or AAB, A derives A or AA, B derives B. This is the grammar, right? This is the context-free grammar. And leftmost derivation for AAB, yesterday we saw that this path could have been used. Okay, one possibility. So how do we write a parse tree for that? It says S derives AB, right? So S derives A and B. Check here, we started with S, starting symbol, and we have two non-terminals. And also keep in mind this was after this, here the left A is expanded as AA, correct? So left A is expanded as A and A. All right. Now you can see this capital A is expanded as small a. So that is A. And finally, this B is replaced by a small b. So you can observe we have three leaves. All leaves are terminals. And all internal nodes which are not leaves are non-terminals, and the root what time I left the meeting? Nobody called and told me also. Can you tell me when did I leave the meeting?
Just 2 minutes ago, ma'am.
Uh, did I draw the parse tree before leaving the meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this was done. This parse tree was done. Hello? This parse tree, was it done? I can't see chat box. You have to unmute and tell me.
Ma'am, your screen is not visible.
Okay, just give me a second. Okay, was this tree done? Can you see the screen?
Yeah, ma'am.
I can't see the chat box when I am in Microsoft Word, so you will have to unmute and tell me. This was told. What about these 2 points? Did I make these 2 points?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So basically, we wrote this parse tree. So a parse tree may correspond to multiple derivations, which means we can do leftmost derivation, rightmost derivation, even multiple leftmost derivations. So the tree that we create could may correspond to multiple derivations. But we cannot tell looking at the parse tree which one was used, because ultimately AAB is generated, right? So AAB can be generated in more than one ways, but by looking at the parse tree, I cannot tell. For example, in this particular tree, when I draw, this A was derived first, then this was derived, and then this was derived. But looking at the parse tree, you cannot say that. Okay, you can't say that. That's the first point. Second point is, it only tells us about the structural facts, how it looks like in derivation. But I don't know the order in which these were expanded when I look at the parse tree. Okay. There is one term called as generative capacity. Okay. There is something called as a weak generative capacity and strong generative capacity. Simple. Weak generative capacity is how many strings can be generated. Okay, it's a set of how many strings can be generated. Strong generative capacity is how many parse tree can be generated by a grammar. Okay, again I'll repeat. Weak generative capacity is how many strings can be generated by the grammar, and strong generative capacity is how many parse trees can be generated by the grammar. This is required only for definition purpose. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now, what do we mean by ambiguity? Okay, maybe sometimes for all strings it will have multiple parse trees. In such case, we say the grammar is ambiguous. Let me repeat this. We have rules in the grammar. We have written a context-free grammar. Suppose for some string, you just saw me writing a parse tree for a string called as AAB. So for AAB, if I can write two parse trees to create that string, then we say the grammar is ambiguous. Okay. So a grammar is ambiguous if and only if there is at least one string. There could be more than one string, but there is at least one string for which the grammar produces more than one parse tree. In that case, we say the grammar is ambiguous. Now let us see one example. Okay, here we have one example grammar, and you can see that for a string like this, they have taken a string which I have to generate, this one. Can you see, you can generate the same thing using two leftmost derivations. Okay, two leftmost derivation. The first one is choosing this first, all right, and the second one is by choosing this first. We can choose any one because all three are starting with S starting symbol. When we start deriving, only rule we know is that it should start with the starting symbol, correct? So that means for this string, if I have two leftmost derivation, that means what? I have two parse tree for same string, isn't it? So if I have two parse trees for the same string, then we say the grammar is ambiguous, correct? So let us write the parse tree for that. If I take the first one, here you can see S expands as open bracket, S, closed bracket, and then one more S, correct? Then one more S. In the next step, what is happening? This S closed bracket. So this S will again expand as open bracket, S, and sorry, not that S, the internal X which is there inside the bracket, right? So this S will be expanded as S, open bracket, and closed bracket. All right. Then you can see this S disappearing, which means I have substituted S with an epsilon. So I have substituted S with a epsilon, right? In the next step, this S is expanded as open bracket, S, and closed bracket. So this S is expanded as open bracket S and closed bracket. Finally, this becomes epsilon. So what do I have now? You can see open, then I have another open, closed, another closed, and open, and a closed, right? One. The same thing I can derive it using this. S derives SS, first step, correct? After that, this S is expanded as open bracket, S and closed bracket. Maybe again this is expanded as open bracket, S, closed bracket and an epsilon. And this S is later expanded as open bracket, S, closed bracket and epsilon. Again in this case also I have open bracket, closed bracket, open and closed. So you can see in this step we started with two different productions. Here we started with open S, closed and S, and here we have started with SS. But both were leftmost derivations themselves. And for this string now I have this tree also and this tree also. Okay, call the grammar as ambiguous. All right. You can see one more example here. In the above example, two leftmost derivations. You see here, I have a leftmost derivation and a rightmost derivation. So you can see S, if I am taking the first one, S derives AB, correct? Basically, I am trying to generate for AAB. Okay, AAB. And then this first A is expanded as AA, correct? And then this A is replaced with this A and B is replaced with B. This is one tree. Now let us see for the second one. We are using S derives AAB, this production. So S derives A and a capital B. And then this B is expanded like this. So again we have two trees. Okay. So grammar cannot have more than one tree to be unambiguous. Now your question might be, what is wrong with ambiguity? What if ambiguous grammars are there? Why can't we have an ambiguous grammar? Again, in the beginning of the class, I told you, with regular grammar or regular languages, we don't care about internal structures. We are only interested in pattern matching. So if I can generate same string in two ways, leftmost derivation, it's okay, because ultimately I just want to match the string. I'm not bothered about the structure at all. Syntax, semantics, I'm not bothered. But context-free grammar, we care about the structure. Syntax is important, isn't it? If you take, for example, let me just tell you, if some condition, okay, and then let us say again one if condition and then else statement is there. I'm just trying to make a point why internal structure is important, isn't it? I haven't written. So by just looking at this, it could be if condition, within this it can be if condition, statement, else statement, right? It can be like this, or it can also be if condition, okay, and then within this if, you can see that this else belong to this, okay. There is an if condition without else, but the else is is associated with this. Okay, else is associated with this. So by looking at this, I cannot tell, isn't it, whether you have a nested if else within the main if, or inside if you have one more if and this else will, okay, and structuring is important. Now let us take one more example to make this point. Let us say we have a grammar like this. Okay, this grammar says I can have these symbols, that is plus into terminal symbols, and additionally E as a non-terminal symbol, which means here you can see there is no additional S here. See, starting symbol is E itself. And now we have to generate into 5. Okay, so 2 is an identifier, plus is a terminal, 3 is an identifier, into is a terminal, 5 is a identifier. Okay, these IDs can be any numbers. So basically 2 plus 3 into I can be written as ID plus ID into ID. So I can start, because plus is there in the left, I can start with this. Okay, I will say E derives E plus E. Fine. And then I want an into, so I'll use this E derives E into E. So E into E. And then we have E derives ID. So each of these E's will derive an ID. And in our case, the IDs are 2, 3, and 5. Okay. Can I do it in another way? Yes, of course I can do it in another way. If you see, I'll start with E derives E star E. Okay. And this E I will expand to E plus E. And then all E's are converted into IDs. Right? So 2, 3, and 5. Now, ambiguity, why is it a problem? Because we'll evaluate the lower level of the tree before the upper level. 3 into 5, 15 plus 2, should it be 17, the answer? Or lower level now has plus. So 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 into 5 is 20. Which one is correct? I mean, instinctively, you know that this is correct. But this tree is written according to the context tree grammar that we have designed. And because it's ambiguous to write a grammar like this, as it generates two trees which will give us entirely different values. Right? I hope this is clear. Can somebody unmute and tell me, is it clear? So that I can move ahead, or if you want, I'll explain once more. Someone please unmute and tell me, is it clear? Are you guys there, alive, listening to me? Hello? Nobody is there?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So can we remove ambiguity? Of course, yes, we can reduce or remove the ambiguity by following certain rules. Okay. So how we can reduce ambiguity? There are multiple things to do. Today we'll do only one thing. All right. So we can remove ambiguity by removing rules which have epsilon in them. In the example that I have given, epsilon is not there, but ambiguity will be there even in the grammars which have epsilon. So you can remove rules with symmetric right hand sides. You can see here something like this. S derives SS, where you can expand either this S first or this S first, or even here where you have the same symbol on the right hand side twice, so that you have an option to expand this or this. If you have symmetric, basically recursion, okay, right? Recursion. If you have recursion, you have to remove them. Is this clear? So we know that grammar is ambiguous if we have recursion. So remove recursion, okay? So we'll see one at a time and then we'll come back for these rules, okay? So how do I remove? Today we'll see only one because this is the last class. How to remove epsilon rules. Now, if you have something like this, okay, C derives epsilon. So I know this is easily a nullable production, right? That I know that C can be turned into an epsilon directly. But I might have something like this, okay, which is just not making it obvious that A can also be an epsilon, but it is indirectly, isn't it? A derives C and C derives epsilon. So actually, even though it's not obvious, A is also nullable. So I have to remove any rule which is nullable, okay, by modifying it. For example, let me take one more example here. Let me just show you one more example. Okay. So we were talking about nullable. For example, you see here, B derives epsilon. Very easy for you to understand. B is nullable, right? Now let us say we have some more equation like C derives B. Now indirectly, because B is nullable, C is also nullable. Okay. Suppose I have D derives D. This is not nullable, correct? This is not nullable. That means D is deriving something which is not null because it's a terminal. Suppose I have A derives BC. Now I know B is nullable, C is nullable. Which means if I make them both as null, A also becomes null, isn't it? So because of this, A is also nullable. Okay. Now what about A derives BD? In this only B is nullable, D is not nullable. So this whole thing cannot be changed. But of course, this has to be modified. Okay. Now modifying is here. What do we mean by modifying? He says, if you have an equation like this, and let us say Q is nullable. See here, if you have something like this, then I can modify this by not having that Q. I can say alpha beta. Okay, I can leave that. Whatever is nullable, you can leave that. These are the basic rules. Let us see one example and stop. Okay. So this is how to remove epsilon. Again, whatever was there on the top, same thing is there here. Okay. So let us just dive into the problem. Same rules. First, you can see here, find the set of nullable variables in this grammar called as G dash. Okay. Now, as I said, initially what is nullable here? Whatever is, I'll just write it as capital N. Initially, C derives epsilon is there, no? So it's directly visible. So in the first step, now I'll add C to nullable, okay? Because of C derives epsilon. Now in the second pass, this is repeat, right? In a repeat, I have to find everything that is nullable. So now in the second step, what I do is I check. Now B derives C. So which means B is also nullable, correct? And you can see A derives C. Since C is nullable, A is also nullable. Okay. So these two, because A derives C and also B derives C, they get converted into nullable in the second pass. Now again, let us see here. You have T derives A, B, C, isn't it? So A, B and C, all three are nullable already in this list. So obviously, since A, B, C are nullable, T also becomes nullable. This is nullable because T derives A, B, C, and A, B and C all are nullable. Is S nullable? No. S is not nullable because it has two terminal symbols. So S is not nullable. Okay. In the are nullable. Okay. Now we have to modify the rules so that I can remove the null from this expression. Okay. So to make a grammar unambiguous, first step is to remove all epsilon productions. Okay, that's what we are doing. We are removing epsilon productions. Why? To remove ambiguity. This is one step. Multiple steps are there. We are going to check only one today. Okay, to remove ambiguity. First step is remove epsilon production. To remove epsilon production, one step is to find all nullable list. Okay, a nullable set. Okay, so you have all nullable non-terminals here. Now in this next step is to convert these productions so that I can remove null. It's very, very easy. Now you see there is one production called as S derives ATA, isn't it? So I'll keep it as it is, S derives ATA. Now, but because T is nullable, that means I can remove T, right? If I substitute epsilon for or AA, okay? From ATA itself, I removed T and I made it as AA. Now let us see, you have T derives ABC. All three are nullable, correct? A, B and C, all three are, or one can be null at a time, correct? So I can take first A is null. If I take only A is null, I am left with BC. I can only make B as null, in which case I will be left with AC. I can also make only C as null, in which case I am left with AB. Okay. And also I can have two of them null at a time, right? So I may have B and C as null, in which case I am putting A. I may have A and B as null, in which case I am left with C. A and C can be null, in which case I am left with B. So this is model production. I have all of them not being null, or one of them being null, or two of them being null. Okay. Next is this production. So A is nullable. So AA, if A is not chosen to be nullable, but if A is chosen as nullable, then I have A, correct? And A derives C remains as it is. Similarly, B derives BB. So I might not make B as nullable, or I may make B as nullable. Okay. So B derives BB turned into two equations or two productions. And then I have C derives C. But the entire exercise that we took now was to remove C derives epsilon, right? Removing epsilon production. So we just kick it out, okay? So you remove that production from final set of productions, okay? From final set of productions. This is your answer. This is small c, okay? This is your answer after removing epsilon productions. In the problems that we'll see tomorrow, this is your first step. If epsilon productions are there, you have to remove epsilon productions by finding everything that is nullable directly or indirectly, and then modifying those productions which have nullable non-terminals in them. Okay? Unmute and ask me. Otherwise, you can mark the attendance and quit.